They told me the flight was at 7. I got to Incheon at 20 past 5 because I've never in my life been late to anything. And I stood in the check-in line behind a family with 3 suitcases and a stroller. And when it was my turn, I put my passport on the counter, and the girl typed my name in, and then typed it again. Sir, there's no booking under Sunjaho. Jeju, 705. Corporate travel, Hanho Logistics. She turned the monitor a little, the way they do when they want you to see that they're not hiding anything. There's a booking that was made. It was canceled at 11:40 last night. By who? The corporate account holder. Behind me, somebody sighed. I moved my bag off the belt so the line could keep going, and I told her sorry, and she said it wasn't my fault, and I said sorry again anyway. I called my brother. Youngsu's phone rang 4 times and went to voicemail, which is what his phone does when he's holding it in his hand and looking at the screen. I called Tayo. He picked up on the second ring, said, "I'm driving, I'll call you back," and hung up before I could say the word Jeju. I sat on the metal bench by column 14 with my 1 suitcase between my feet. Everything I owned that mattered was in it, because the rest of my things were supposed to be shipped down to the island next week. 2 suits, a rice cooker, my grandmother's kitchen scissors, the heavy ones, the only thing I took from the house after the funeral. Then my phone buzzed. Your account ending 4417 has been closed at the account holder's request. Final balance transferred to the primary family account. Thank you for banking with us. I read it maybe 6 times. There's a stupid thing your brain does where it keeps looking for a different word in the same sentence. I had 41,001 in my wallet and a transit card, and the sun was coming up over the parking structure, orange on all that concrete, and a man in an airport uniform was walking down the row of benches, waking up people who'd slept there. He got to me and stopped. Flight? No, I said. Not anymore. The taxi cost 18,000 of the 41 and I let it. Because there's a version of that morning where I take the bus with a suitcase and stand for 90 minutes and arrive at my own front door, and it's still locked, and I wanted to get to the locked part faster. Seongnam, 3rd floor. Our family has owned that apartment since before I was born. I want to be clear about something because people always assume the poor brother slept on the floor while the rich ones ate. It wasn't like that. I ate what they ate. I went to a decent school. On paper, I had everything. I just never had anything of my own. When I was 14, they turned my room into an office for Jung-soo, who was studying for exams, and I slept in the storage room off the kitchen for 7 months. Nobody was cruel about it. My father carried the mattress in himself. He said, "You're the youngest, you're flexible." Everyone laughed, including me, because that's what you do when you're 14 and the room is already gone. At grandmother's funeral, I stood in the 2nd row, not because anyone told me to. I came late from the parking lot where I'd been directing the cars, and by the time I got inside, the 1st row was full, and Teo looked back at me and turned around again. At 20, Teo said the thing that stuck. We were arguing about whether I'd go to the company or do something else, and he got tired and said, "Jae-ho, you're on the balance sheet. Just be on it quietly," he apologized an hour later. I said it was fine. I've said it was fine about 400 times in 27 years, and I think that's how you train people to keep doing it. Keypad on the door had been replaced. New one, brushed steel, still had a bit of the protective film on the corner. I punched in our code out of habit. Red light. I tried my birthday. Red light. I stood there and looked at that little film corner for a while. Mrs. Bake from 302 came out with her recycling and told me the movers came yesterday afternoon. 2 men and a truck. Very fast. Very polite. And did I want her to hold anything? Hold what? She pointed with her chin at the landing. 2 cardboard boxes. Taped. Stacked. On the side of the top one in black marker. Jae-ho, cloths. Under it, Jae-ho, misk. The handwriting was mine. Slanted the same way, the same stupid loop I put on the 2nd stroke of my name. Somebody had copied it off something, carefully, the way you'd copy a signature. It wasn't even close enough to fool me, which meant it wasn't meant to fool me. It was meant for the movers, or for Mrs. Beck, or for anyone who might one day ask whether the youngest son packed his own things. I opened the top box on the landing floor, my winter coat, folded, 3 shirts, a charger, wound and rubber banded, which I don't do, I just throw them in. The rice cooker wasn't there. I stood in the hallway of the building I grew up in, holding a box with my own handwriting on it, and I couldn't stop thinking about a rice cooker. The Hanho Logistics building is 11 floors on the edge of Songpa, with a lobby they redid 2 years ago in gray stone that gets dusty in a way nobody predicted. I've worked there since I was 22. Night dispatch mostly. Refrigerated freight, port transit, the schedule nobody else wants, which suited me because at night nobody comes down to tell you how you're doing. My badge didn't open the turnstile. The guard, Mr. Cho, has known me for 5 years. He looked at my badge, then at his monitor, then at his own hands. It's deactivated in the system, Jeho SSI. When? Yesterday. 11 something at night. Everything happened at 11 something at night. That's the part that got under my skin later. Not that they did it, but that they did it after dinner. Somebody sat down after dinner and worked through a list. Young-soo came down. He does this thing where he arrives already talking. So the conversation starts in the middle and you're behind from the first word. Gray suit, no tie, phone in his left hand, screen down. You missed the flight. There wasn't a flight. There was a flight. The booking was moved to Thursday. HR sent it. He glanced at his phone. To your work address, which is deactivated. He looked up like this was a small shared misfortune. That's on IT. I'll have them fix it. 2 women from finance came past us, and Young-soo smiled at them, and they smiled back, and he waited exactly until they were through the turnstile. The apartment, I said. Rent it out. You're relocating. I wasn't relocating. I found out this morning. You found out in March? It was in the restructure memo. He said it with total ease. There was a restructure memo. There was a line in it about the Jeju branch. My name wasn't in it. Both of those things are true, and only one of them is provable in a lobby. Look, this is a promotion, branch operations. You'd be running your own floor down there instead of sitting in the dark up here. The account. The family account was consolidated for the audit. You'll get a card in a week. I've got 23,001, Hyung. And there it was. The only moment his face did anything. Not guilt. A kind of impatience, like when a machine you've already paid for makes an unexpected noise. He reached into his jacket, and I thought, if he takes out his wallet in this lobby, I'm going to remember it forever. And he took out his wallet in that lobby. How much do you need for the week? I need my apartment. Gyeho. I need my job and my badge and my rice cooker. Your what? Someone from the 7th floor came out of the elevator, saw us, and slowed down the way people slow down when there's something to watch. Jung-soo put his hand on my shoulder, warm, firm, both of us facing out toward the lobby, so from any angle it looked like a man comforting his younger brother. Don't make a scene, he said, quiet, close to my ear. You've never been any good at it. He was right. That's the thing. He was completely right. And he knew it the way you know the weight of a thing you've picked up 1,000 times. He put 50,001 in my jacket pocket and walked back to the elevator. And I stood in the middle of the gray stone until Mr. Cho stopped pretending to look at his screen. I took the money out and left it on the guard desk on my way out. For the coffee fund, I said. Mr. Cho didn't touch it. Last I saw it was still sitting there, folded in half, when I looked back through the glass. I found Tayo in the parking garage on level B2, next to his car on the phone. And when he saw me, he ended the call in the middle of somebody else's sentence. My middle brother has always been the one who couldn't stand the room being quiet. He talks to fill it. He talked now about the branch, about how Jeju's actually beautiful in autumn, about how the seafood there ruins you for Seoul seafood, about a guy he knows who moved to Jeju and now actually surfs at 40. I let him get all the way to the surfing. Who canceled the ticket? Ticketing's automated. Who closed the account? Yahoo. He pushed his hair back with both hands, which he's done since he was a kid, and it's the only honest thing about him. It's not, you're making it into a thing with sides. There aren't sides. He got his wallet out too. Both of them. In one morning, he had a lot of cash, the way he always does, and he pushed it at my chest and I stepped back so it fell and he had to pick it up off the concrete. And that made him angry, finally, which was almost a relief. Take the money, he said from the floor. Take it and go down there and don't come back for a while. He stood up. He was breathing through his mouth. Shouldn't still have been here in October. I heard it. I want to be honest. I heard it and I filed it and I didn't understand a single thing about it. What's in October? And his whole face closed, like a shop shutter coming down. Nothing's in October. He got in his car. He backed out badly, clipped the corner of the pillar with his mirror, didn't stop, and the sound of it went up through all of B2. I stood there with a suitcase and 2 boxes I'd left with Mrs. Bake and 23,001 and a phone at 12%. And I said the word October out loud in an empty parking garage to nobody. Here's what nobody tells you. The first night isn't the bad one. The first night, you're still solving a problem. I went to a Jimjilbang in Garikdong that's open 24 hours and costs 12,001, and I told myself I was being smart about it. You get a locker, you get a mat, you get a floor with 40 other men on it, and the lights stay on low all night. And somebody's phone plays a drama at the volume of a man who thinks his earbuds are in. I lay on the mat with my arm over my eyes and did the math over and over. 11,001 left. 900 if I ate. At 3 in the morning, I did the thing I'd been not doing all day, which was to scroll through my contacts looking for someone to call. 340 contacts. Warehouse guys, drivers, customs brokers, 2 ex-girlfriends, my university roommate, who moved to Vancouver. I got to the bottom without pressing anything, and I understood something about my own life that I'd been polite about for a very long time. I know an enormous number of people, and I have made absolutely sure that none of them owe me anything, because owing goes both ways, and if nobody owes me, then I never have to be the man who asks. Second night, I found out that Jim Jill Bang wanted the money up front, and I had 11,000. Bus terminal then. Seoul Nambu, the row of seats by the west entrance where the cleaners don't come until 5. There's a guy there, older, who has clearly been doing it much longer than me, and he moved his bag over about 6 inches to make room. And neither of us said anything. And I have thought about that 6 inches more than I've thought about anything my brothers did. Thursday, I sold my watch at a pawn shop in Sindarim. Not a nice watch. 60,000. In between, I looked for work. And that's where it stopped being a bad week and started being something with a shape. Dispatch is a small world. There are maybe 11 companies in the country doing serious reefer transit, and I know somebody at 9 of them. Wednesday morning, I called director Huang at Kyungdo, who once drove 90 minutes at midnight to bring me a spare genset because I asked nicely. And he was warm for about 40 seconds, and then he wasn't. Send me your CV, JHOSS. You've seen my CV. You tried to hire me in 2023. Things are tight. Hyung. A pause with an office in it. Somebody laughing behind him. A printer. There's a note on you, he said, in the shared file. Not a criminal thing. It says pending internal review. Do not onboard. Pending review of what? It doesn't say. It just says the family will clarify. I want to explain what that phrase does in this industry, because if you don't work in it, you'll think it's nothing. Nobody checks whether the review is real. Nobody wants to be the man who hired the Sun family's problem 3 weeks before the Sun family calls to ask about capacity. It costs them nothing to skip me, and it might cost them a contract to take me. So they skip me, every one of them, politely and with warmth, and with a request that I send the CV anyway. 2 of them didn't even let me finish. One asked me, carefully, whether it was money or drugs. I stopped calling on Thursday afternoon after the 6th one, and I sat on a bench outside a convenience store in Sindarim with a coffee from the 2-for-1 shelf. And I worked out that my brothers had not thrown me out of a house. They'd thrown me out of a profession. The house was just the part you could see from the street. Thursday night, the terminal was full. There's a rhythm to that place after 1 in the morning. The last Busan coach comes in. 40 people spill out and thin away in 10 minutes, and then it's just us. The cleaner does the west entrance at 5, and you have to be up and looking like a man waiting for a bus by 4:50. The older guy with the 6 inches of bench asked me on the second night what happened. Not gently, the way you'd ask about a truck. Family, I said. He nodded like I'd said the weather. Wife? Brothers. Ah. He got a bun out of his bag and tore it in half and put half on the bench between us and did not look at me while he did it, so that I could take it without it being a gift. I ate it. It was the best thing I ate that week, and I've had dinner since in places with a wine list. He told me his name was Mr. Gu, and that he'd been a machinist in Ansan for 31 years. He told me the trick with the terminal is to never sleep with your bag under your head, always through the strap and against the wall, because they don't take the bag, they take the shoes. He told me about 6 other things like that, in order, like a man handing over a job. Then he said, don't call them again. I haven't. You will. Around day 9 or 10, you'll decide it was a misunderstanding. He wiped his hands on his knees. It's never a misunderstanding. Nobody spends 3 months arranging a misunderstanding. Friday, I ate 1 meal and slept sitting up because it rained and the covered part of the terminal was full. Saturday, I got on the 9403 out to Namyangju with 2 bags of groceries, because Saturday is Solyang. I'd been going out there every Saturday for a year and 2 months. It started stupidly. A driver I knew got a shipment of rice damaged in transit. Wet corners, unsellable, perfectly fine inside, and he was going to eat the loss, and I said I'd take it off the manifest and find somewhere for it. I found a care home with 41 beds and a director who cried on the phone because their food budget had been cut in March. After that, I just kept going. Not with damaged rice, with my own money, which was never much, but the buses out there are cheap and I had nowhere to be on Saturdays anyway. I asked the volunteer coordinator to keep me off the group chat. Not out of modesty. Because the second something like that gets written down, somebody at work sees it, and then it becomes a thing about me instead of a thing about them. So that Saturday, with 60,000 won from a pawned watch, I spent 22 on rice and eggs, and 2 boxes of persimmons, and I rode an hour out of the city to give it away. I know exactly how that sounds. I didn't have an argument for it. I just knew what happens to old people on the weekend when nobody comes. Solyang is a converted school building with a ramp bolted onto the front steps and a courtyard where somebody's grown tomatoes in paint buckets. I carried the bags through the front hall, and Mrs. O at the desk said the persimmons were too expensive, and I said they were on sale, which was a lie. And she wrote them into the ledger as donated value, unknown. Room 4 is where grandmother Malsoon is. Kim Malsoon is 81. She has a bad hip and a mind like a filing cabinet, and she does not ever ask you how you are as a formality. When she asks, she wants the answer, and she will wait through the entire silence to get it. I sat on the plastic stool by her bed and peeled a persimmon with grandmother's kitchen scissors, because I carry them, which is a strange thing about me that I don't explain to people. She watched me do it. "You wore that shirt last week," she said. "It's a good shirt." "It's the same shirt." I kept peeling. The peel came off in one long piece, and I was pleased about that in a way that had nothing to do with the peel. "Where are you sleeping, Jaho?" "Same place." "Which is outside. Somebody was hosing down the courtyard and the water was hitting the paint buckets." "It's temporary," I said. She took the persimmon out of my hand. She held it. "She's got hands like paper over wire." "Your grandmother had a way of saying that word," she said. "Temporary. She used it about your grandfather's business for 11 years. I looked up, because in 14 months I had never told her my grandmother's name, or that I had one, or that she was dead. I talk about freight. I talk about the weather and the buses and whether the kitchen got the new fryer. I'm careful. I've always been careful. "How do you know about my grandmother?" Malson put the persimmon down on the tray. She looked at the door, which was open, and at the corridor past it, where a nurse was pushing the medication cart and singing to herself off-key. "Close that," she said. I closed it. "Sit down properly. Not on the edge like you're leaving." I sat back on the stool. "Your grandmother took sugar in her coffee and lied about it," she said. "She kept the good scissors in the second drawer, under the cloth, because your grandfather used them on wire and it ruined the blade. She had a mole here." She touched the side of her own throat. "She wore the collar up for 40 years because of it. In July, in August, in the hospital. Every single one of those things was true." The scissors were in my jacket pocket at that moment. I had them out on the tray, in front of both of us, with persimmon skin on the blade. "You worked for us," I said. 26 years. "I don't remember you." "You were 4 when I left." She said it without any weight, which somehow made it worse. "You used to come into the kitchen at 6 in the morning because nobody else in that house got up, and you'd sit on the flour bin and I'd give you the end of the bread." Your brothers never came into the kitchen once. Not once in 26 years. There was nothing in there they needed. The nurse went past outside, still singing. "Why are you here?" I said. "In this place, if you were with us that long, there's a pension. There's a very good pension," Malsoon said. "My granddaughters would put me in a hotel if I asked for it." "Then why?" "Because this is the nearest care home to your office." I sat there on that plastic stool with my hands on my knees. She reached over and picked the scissors up off the tray, and she turned them so the maker's mark caught the light from the window, and she checked it. That's what she did. She checked the mark like a woman confirming a delivery. 14 months, she said. "Every Saturday, and you never once told anyone here your family name." I asked Mrs. O twice. "It's not relevant." "It's the only thing that's relevant." She put the scissors down. "Your grandmother said you'd be like this." She said, "He won't come and ask, that one. He'll wait to be told, and you'll be dead by then." "Ajimeoni. Ask me next week," she said. "Not today. I need to make a phone call first, and I need to be sure of something. And I am 81 years old, and I have exactly one thing left to do in my life. And I'm not going to do it badly on a Saturday afternoon." She turned her face to the window. "Eat the persimmon," she said. "You've lost weight since April." There was a car in the Solyang lot that did not belong in the Solyang lot. Dark green, low, the kind of quiet German thing that costs more than the building's annual food budget, parked crooked across 2 spaces like whoever drove it had bigger problems than parking. I was carrying the last 2 rice sacks in from the bus stop, 20 kilos each, one on each shoulder. When the front doors banged open and a woman came out backwards, pulling a wheelchair over the lip of the ramp the wrong way. Which is how you tip somebody out of a wheelchair. "Other way?" I said. "Back wheels first?" She turned around. I'm going to skip the part where I describe her, because I know what that sounds like, and because it isn't the point of this story. But I'll say this much. She was about my age, in a jacket that cost more than my month, with her hair up in a clip that was falling out, and she had a smear of dirt across one cheekbone from the wheelchair tire. "I know that," she said. "I know back wheels first. It's stuck on the lip." "It's not stuck. The brake's half on." I put the rice down, released the brake, and rolled Mr. Yang backwards down the ramp, and Mr. Yang, who is 90 and deaf in one ear, said loudly that I was the only one there who knew what I was doing, and the woman heard it, and I watched her decide not to be annoyed by it. "You work here?" "No." "Then what are you?" "Saturday," I said. She laughed. It came out of her before she'd approved it. which I've learned is the only kind of laugh worth anything. She pushed Mr. Yang to the tomato buckets and came back while I was hauling the sacks to the kitchen. And she followed me in and watched me stack them. And then she asked what I did on the other 6 days. And I said dispatch, and she asked dispatch for who? And I said nobody, currently. And she looked at me for about a second and a half longer than the answer needed. Han Seri, she said. Jeho. Just Jeho? Sun Jeho. Nothing on her face. I've thought about that since. Nothing at all. And she is not a woman built for hiding things, so either it meant nothing at that moment or she was better at it than she looks. She came out to the lot when I was leaving. She had her grandmother's overnight bag over her shoulder. She was taking Malson home for the weekend, which apparently they did once a month, which I had somehow never once witnessed in 14 months of Saturdays. Let me give you money for the bus. No, you brought 40 kilos of rice on a bus. I brought it on 2 buses, I said. The first one's the hard one. She got out her card, then her phone, then she actually looked in the pockets of that jacket for cash like a person who genuinely does not carry it. And she found a 50 and held it out, and I put my hands in my pockets. You're going to stand there, she said. I'm going to stand here. Why? Nobody had asked me why in a very long time. Everybody just moves on when I say no. Because when a man with nothing says no to money, it makes the room uncomfortable and people would rather leave it. Because then it's a transaction, I said. And then next Saturday, I'd have to think about whether I was coming here for them or for the 50,001, and I'd rather not find out. She put the money away. She got in the green car. She backed out of the 2 spaces she'd taken and stopped level with me and put the window down. The 9403 doesn't run again till 10 past. I know that's 40 minutes. I know. She sat there with the engine on and her hand on the gear stick, and she looked at me the way you look at a piece of freight when the weight on the manifest doesn't match the weight on the scale. Then she drove off. I stood in that lot for 40 minutes and I did not think about her once because I was thinking about the word October and where I was going to sleep, and whether Mrs. O had written down the persimmons at the price I actually paid. Inside the car, going down the hill toward the expressway, Malson said nothing for about 4 kilometers. Then she said, the boy with the rice. He wouldn't take bus money. No, he wouldn't. You know him? The old woman looked out at the reservoir going by. There was a bag on her lap she'd brought from her room, and she had both hands flat on top of it, and she did not move them. That's Sun Gumson's grandson, she said, the youngest one. Sari turned her head. Hanho? Those sons? There's only one family of them. He said he's not working. No, said Malsoon, he isn't. She was quiet again for a while, and then she said the thing that made her granddaughter pull over into the emergency lane on the soul-bound side of a national expressway at 4 in the afternoon. I've been waiting 11 years for that boy to come to me on his own, Malsoon said. I couldn't go to him. It had to be him. Those were the terms. Grandma, what terms? And Malsoon opened the bag on her lap and put her hand inside it, on something flat, and closed it again without taking anything out. Turn the car around, she said. The 9403 was 6 minutes early that day, which it has never been before or since. So when the green car came back up the hill and swung into the Solyang lot at 20 to 5, there was nobody standing in it. Mrs. O told me about it later. Months later, the way you tell someone about whether they missed. A woman in an expensive jacket out of the car before it had properly stopped, asking for the man with the rice. Not by name. Nobody at Solyang had my name written anywhere except a ledger line that said donated, value, unknown. No phone number, no address. 14 months of Saturdays, and I'd made sure of that. Mrs. O said the old lady in the car wouldn't get out. She just sat there with a bag on her lap and said, he'll come back next Saturday. He always comes back. That was the plan they had. Wait a week. I didn't have a week. I had 11,001. Monday I went to the port. Not because I had a clever idea. Because there is exactly one place in this country where a man with no references and no bank account and a note in the shared file can put his hands on money in the same week. The gate office at Incheon Newport, where the terminals hire day labor off a clipboard for the lashing crews and the container yards, and nobody asks you for a CV because the job is your CV hour by hour. Han Marine Logistics runs Terminal 4. 9 berths, reefer yard, bonded warehouse, and about a kilometer of stacked boxes that from the gate look like a city that somebody built out of Lego and then got bored of. I stood in the line at 6 in the morning with about 60 other men, and a foreman came out with a clipboard and read names. And at the end he said, anyone reefer certified? 2 of us put our hands up. The other guy's certificate was expired. That's how I got in. Not talent. A card in my wallet that my brothers forgot to cancel because it wasn't issued by Hanho. It was issued by the Korea Refrigeration Association in 2019, and there is a version of this whole story where Teo remembers that card and I go to Jeju. The work was fine. It was actually the first fine thing in 9 days. You plug and unplug reefer units, you log set point temperatures, you check the return air readings, and you write down anything out of tolerance. And if you're any good, you walk the rows with your ears open because a compressor that's about to die makes a sound like a coin in a washing machine. By the third day, I'd stopped noticing that I was sleeping in a container terminal rest cabin with 4 other men and a broken heater. By the 4th day, I found the thing. Row H, stacks 11 through 19. 41 reefers, all inbound from Qingdao, all pharma grade, all sitting in the 3rd tier of a stack in an 8-degree ambient, with the sea wind coming straight down the row. I checked the manifest on the yard tablet. The set points were right, the plugs were right, the paperwork was perfect, and they were in the wrong place. Terminal 4 has a genset ring main that splits at row G. Everything from H onward runs off the secondary feed. On a normal day, that's nothing. But the secondary feed drops to standby when the ship-to-shore cranes on berths 7 and 8 both spin up, which they were going to do at Vor Force Sero Friday for the Wan Hai call. I'd seen the berthing window on the board in the gate office, and 41 pharma reefers on standby feed for the 90 minutes of a crane peak means the unit cycle. And cycling means the temperature log shows a deviation, and a deviation on pharma means the consignee rejects the entire load at the gate. Nobody would lose the cargo. They'd lose the certificate on the cargo, which is the same thing with extra steps and lawyers. I told the foreman. He said the yard plan came down from planning, and planning doesn't take calls from the lashing line. I said okay. Then I did the thing that has always got me in trouble, which is that instead of leaving it, I sat down on an upturned crate at the end of row H with the yard tablet and typed it out. Not a complaint. A 1-page move plan, which 41 boxes, which slots in row D and E were empty, how many reach stacker moves it would cost, how many hours, and what the alternative cost was if the Wan Hai call went ahead as planned. 11 minutes of work. I put it in the shift log under observations, and I went back to plugging units, and I forgot about it, because I had been writing things in observations for 5 years at Hanho, and nothing had ever once come of it. At 21:40, the foreman came down the row with a torch and found me and said, "Who are you?" "Day crew." They want the day crew who rode in the log to come up to the tower. Terminal 4's control tower is 8 floors of nothing, and then 1 floor of glass. And from up there, the whole yard is orange under the sodium lights, and the ships look like buildings that have gone for a walk. She was standing at the window with her back to the room. Han Yuna doesn't turn around when you come in. I've since watched her do it to a chairman of a shipping line. She lets you stand there and look at her back while she finishes whatever she is doing in her head, and it is the single most annoying and effective thing I have ever seen a person do. "Row H," she said. "Explain the crane peak." I explained the crane peak. "Who told you about the secondary feed?" "Nobody. It's on the schematic in the plug room. Somebody laminated it in 2016. "Nobody reads that." "It's laminated," I said. "Somebody wanted it read." Then she turned around. Older than her sister by 4 or 5 years and about 6 degrees colder, and dressed like the building, black, gray. Nothing that would catch on anything. She was holding a printout of my 1-page move plan, and she'd written on it in pencil, which I noticed because nobody writes on anything in pencil anymore. "Your move plan is wrong," she said. "You put 19 boxes in row DDs reserved for the bonded transfers on Sunday. Then E in the west end of F. F floods. F floods at the north end. The west end is on the ramp." She looked at me for a second. "How long have you been on this terminal?" 4 days. She put the paper down on the desk and squared it with 2 fingers, and she said, without any change in her voice at all, "Sun Jaho, youngest of 3. Night dispatch at Hanho Logistics for 5 years until the 22nd of last month, when your access was revoked at 2311, along with your building pass, your corporate card, and the family account you were a signatory on. There is a note in the industry file that says pending internal review. Hanho has been a subcontractor of this terminal for 11 years, which means I have 406 of your dispatch logs in my system. And I have read a number of them, because your logs are the only ones from that company that are ever specific about anything. The tower makes a hum. That's all there was for a while." "You looked me up," I said. "You wrote a move plan on my tablet with my 41 boxes on it." "Yes, I looked you up." She sat down. "My sister has spent 9 days trying to find a man with rice. My grandmother has spent 9 days not sleeping. And you came in through the gate office at 6 in the morning like day labor. I am day labor. You're a reefer dispatcher who lashed containers for 4 days because he didn't want to ask anyone for anything." She said it flat, no admiration in it at all, which was the only reason I could stand it. "Where are you sleeping?" "Rest cabin. After Friday, the cabin's clear for the yard audit on Friday." I didn't say anything, because I hadn't known that, and because the answer to the question after Friday was a bus terminal and a man called Mr. Gu. Yuna opened a drawer, took out a keycard, and put it on the desk between us. There's a company apartment in Songdo. 2 bedrooms. It's empty because the man who lived in it retired in June and I haven't filled it. Take it. I looked at the keycard. No. She had not, I think, planned for that syllable. It's not charity, it's staff housing. I'm day labor on a clipboard. Day labor doesn't get staff housing. I put my hands behind my back, which is a thing I do so I don't touch things I've said no to. If I take that today, then tomorrow, when I tell you something about your yard that you don't want to hear, I'll say it softer. That's not useful to you. You've known me for 4 minutes. That's about how long it takes. Yuna sat back. She did the pencil thing again, aligning it exactly with the edge of the paper, and I understood later that this is what she does instead of showing anything on her face. Then you'll owe me, she said. What? You want it to be work. Fine, it's work. She picked up the phone on the desk. Quan says, take the clipboard man in row H off day rates and put him on the reefer desk, nights, starting tonight. Full shift. And Quan Si. He moves row H before the Wanhai call. All 41. He'll tell you where. He put the phone down. That's a job, she said. You can sleep in the cabins until Friday. On Friday we'll have this conversation again. And you'll still say no, and I'll let you, because I want to see how long you can do it. I got as far as the door. Son SSI, I turned. The persimmons, Yuna said. My sister says you told the front desk they were on sale. They were. Solyang buys persimmons at 1,800 a kilo from the same market. There was no sale in the second week of October in the last 4 years. She was already looking at her screen. Good night. Night shift on the reefer desk is a small dark room with 9 monitors and a kettle. I liked it more than anything I'd done at Hanho, and that is a sentence I would have found insulting 3 weeks earlier. At Hanho I was a son, and every instruction I gave went through a filter in the other person's head that said this is the youngest one, he's here because of his name. At Han Marine I was the clipboard man from row H, and when I said move it, it moved, and that was all. Around 2 in the morning, when there's nothing on the boards, you think? I thought about the kitchen. 6 in the morning, 4 years old, sitting on the flour bin with the end of the bread, and a woman I did not remember at all standing at the counter with her back to me. I thought about my brothers never once going into that kitchen, and I started rereading my own childhood the way you reread a contract after the deal goes bad. 14. The storage room. My father said you're flexible, but it was Jung-soo who suggested it, in front of everyone over dinner, and he had the room measurements already. 17. University. I wanted the Maritime Academy in Busan. Teo told my father the tuition timing clashed with something. I went to a school in Seoul, 40 minutes from the house, and lived at home for 4 more years. 22. Jung-soo personally arranged my job at Hanho, night dispatch. He called it learning the business from the floor. 5 years on the floor and not one rotation, not one training program, not 1 week in the head office. 24. I said I'd go and work in Singapore for a competitor, a real offer, good money. The whole family sat me down. My mother cried. Jung-soo said, if you leave, who's here when father's ill? Every single one of those decisions kept me in the same 40-minute radius, in the same building, on the same payroll, with the same name and no title. They never hated me. I want to be accurate. Hatred is loud and it takes effort, and my brothers are efficient men. What they had for me was closer to how you feel about a smoke alarm that chirps. You don't hate it, you just want to know exactly where it is at all times, and you'd like it to stop. At 3:20, my phone buzzed. Loan reference 88 to 4471, principal 12 million KRW, first payment overdue. Contact us to avoid further action. I hadn't taken a loan. I read the reference number 3 times, and then I put the phone face down on the desk and went and checked the return air readings on row H. All 41, one at a time, in the dark, because it was the only thing on this earth I could still control. I found out the rest later, so I'll put it here where it belongs. That same week, in a private room on the 40th floor of the Taesung Capitol building, my eldest brother signed a term sheet. 240 billion won of growth capital into Hanho Logistics, a new bonded facility in Pyeongtaek. A seat on the board for the investor. Photographs afterwards at a table with an orchid on it, and on page 9 in the conditions precedent. 1 clause. Consolidation of 100% of issued shares under the control of the executive directors, certified by independent counsel, prior to the second tranche. Chairman Park Dong-hoon had a daughter. Jung-soo married her in March of last year. Teo married a girl he'd known since middle school in September of the same year. 6 months later, and everyone at that wedding said what a beautiful surprise it was that both brothers had settled down in 1 year. They came for me on a Thursday, both of them. I came off shift at 7 in the morning, and the green car was at the terminal gate with the hazards on in a place you absolutely cannot stop, and the gate guard was arguing with it and losing. Sari got out first, and she was already angry. Sun Jaho, morning, 14 months. She came around the front of the car. She had a coffee in each hand, which somewhat undercut the effect. 14 months of Saturdays, and you sat in my grandmother's room, and you gave me your name, and you didn't think to mention that I'm what? She stopped. Because there is no end to that sentence that doesn't sound insane. That you're the one we've been looking for. That you're a line in a document. That my grandmother has a bag she won't put down. Yuna got out of the passenger side, which surprised me. I'd assumed she was a woman who drove. Get in the car, Yuna said. You're blocking the gate. You're blocking the gate. Yes, get in it. We went to a kimbap place on the road out of the port that opens at 6 for the port cruise and has plastic stools. I want to say that for the record, 2 women who between them own a container terminal, and we ate kimbap on plastic stools, and Yuna wiped hers down first with a napkin without commenting on it. Sari talked. Yuna watched. The offer was straightforward and they'd clearly rehearsed the order of it. Their house in Yeonhui-dong, 3rd floor, own bathroom, own entrance from the side stair, no rent. Grandmother comes home from Solyang on weekends and there's a lift and somebody has to help her with the chair anyway. That last part's a lie, I said. Sari didn't even blink. It's a very good lie. You should take it. There's a live-in carer. Mrs. O told me. Mrs. O talks too much. Yuna put down her chopsticks. You've got a loan letter, she said. That stopped me. How do you? 12 million won. Opened on the 11th. Mobile onboarding, biometric verification. She said it like a birth number. The lender is a subsidiary of a group that does about 40% of its business with Taesung Capital. Your brother's father-in-law is Taesung Capital. So either you have taken out a 12 million won loan in the middle of sleeping in a container yard, or you haven't. I haven't. I know you haven't. She squared her chopsticks with the edge of the tray. You've got about 5 weeks before they escalate that to a collection order, and a collection order attaches to wages, and you're on our payroll now, which means it comes to my finance department, which means my finance department will have your name in a file, and once it's in a file, it's in the industry. You know how that works better than I do? Then take me off the payroll. Sari put her coffee down hard enough that the lid came half off. That's what you got out of that? It's the part that's my problem. You're impossible. I'm not going to live in your house. Why? She leaned in. And don't say transaction. Say the real one. I sat on that plastic stool with a plate of kimbap I hadn't paid for, and I gave her the real one, which I have never given to anybody, before or since, except her. Because I've been a project, I said. I was my mother's project when I was small, and I was my father's project when he got sick, and I was Jongsu's project for 5 years, and the whole time they were being very kind to me. And I found out this month what it was actually for. So you'll forgive me if I don't move into a house with 2 women who found out my family name before I gave it to them and who have been driving around Namyangju looking for me for 9 days, for reasons neither of you will say out loud. Yuna didn't move. Sari went red from the collar up, and then she said the thing I still hear in my head at odd moments. In the exact tone she said it, which was not gentle at all. You're not a project. You're a man with nowhere to sleep. Those are different things, and you're mixing them up on purpose, because as long as it's about your pride, you don't have to notice it's about a bed. And she got up and went and sat in the car. Yuna finished her coffee. She put a business card on the tray, face down, and turned it over with one finger. Friday, she said. The cabin's clear at noon. It rained on Friday. Not the good kind. The kind that comes sideways off the water and gets under the collar of a jacket in 11 seconds. The cabin's cleared at noon for the audit. I moved my bag to the gate office. At 4, the gate office told me they were locking it. At 6, I found out that the Jim Jilbang in Garrick-dong had shut for renovation, actual renovation, scaffolding, a sign with a date in March, and that the terminal in Nambu had a police check on that night because of a thing that had happened on Wednesday, and men with bags were being asked for ID and an onward ticket. My phone died at 7:40. I stood under the overhang of the plug room at Terminal 4 with a duffel and a container yard in front of me. And I'll tell you exactly what I was thinking. Because it wasn't noble and it wasn't brave. I was thinking that the reefer desk was heated and that if I sat in it all night on my night off, nobody would technically notice, and that this was what my life had come to on day 19. Headlights came down the service road at 9. The green car stopped in the rain about 10 meters away. Nobody got out. The passenger door opened from the inside and stayed open, and the dome light came on. And I could see Sari sitting there with both hands on the wheel, looking straight ahead through the wipers. She didn't call out. She didn't say anything at all. She just sat there with the door open and let the rain come into her own car for 4 minutes while I stood under an overhang and did the arithmetic on the last 20 years of my life. I got in. She closed the door and put the heat on my side and pulled out, and we were on the expressway before she spoke, and what she said was, "There's soup at the house. It's not for you specifically. She makes too much." Okay. It's soup, Jaho. Nobody's adopting you. Okay. And then quieter, with her eyes on the road. "You waited under that thing for 2 hours?" "How do you know that?" "Because I've been parked on the service road for 2 hours," she said, arguing with myself about whether coming to get you counted as taking your choice away. The house in Yeonhui-dong is old money that got renovated by people with taste, which means it looks like nothing from the street and then it doesn't stop. I met the housekeeper. I met the carer who was real and who was delighted to have someone to complain to about the lift. I met a dog, briefly, who did not care for me. Yuna came down when I was at the bottom of the side stair with my duffel still on my shoulder. "Third floor," she said. "I want to say something first." "Say it upstairs, you're soaked." "I'll say it here." I put the duffel down and got out my notebook, the yard notebook, water damaged along the top edge, and I tore out a page and wrote on it against the wall. "Room, Yeonhui-dong, 700,000 won per month from 15th. Deducted at source from wages. Han Marine payroll in writing, starting this month. Signed, Sun Jae-ho." I put it on the hall table. Sari looked at it and made a sound like she'd been hit in the stomach with a small pillow. 700,000? That room has a 700,000, I said, or I walk back down that hill and you can watch me do it. And neither of us wants that because it's a very long hill and it's raining. Yuna picked up the paper. She read it twice. She could have torn it up. I've thought about this a lot. She could have laughed at it, or told me what that floor is actually worth, or done any of the 9 things that would have ended me right there. She took a pen out of her jacket, signed under my name, wrote accepted, HMY, and put it back on the hall table. Face up. Right in the middle, under the lamp, where anybody coming through that door would see it. It stayed there for 4 months. The first week in that house, I got up at 5 and left before either of them was awake, and came back after 11, and I thought I was being unobtrusive. On the 4th morning, there was coffee on the hall table at 5 past 5, in a flask with the cap already loosened, and my name on a sticky note in handwriting like an architect's. I gave the flask back that evening, washed. 5th morning, it was there again. 6th morning, I came down, and Yuna was standing in the kitchen in a gray jumper with her hair down, which I had not seen and did not know what to do with. And she said, "Sit for 10 minutes. I want to ask you something about the Qingdao consigne." And she asked me about the Qingdao consigne for 11 minutes, and it was a real question, and she took notes, and at the end she said, "Thank you," and went upstairs. She did that for 4 days in a row. Sari's version was different. Sari came down the stairs the way other people come through a door. She'd sit on the counter, eat half of whatever I'd made, complain about it. Tell me what happened on the flotilla that day, mimic her own operations manager, and stay exactly as long as I let her. She never once asked me a work question. She asked me things like whether I could actually cook or was just following the packet, and whether I'd ever been on a plane, and what the storage room off the kitchen had smelled like. I said flour and detergent. She said, "For 7 months?" And I said yes, and she got off the counter and left the room, and I heard her go up 2 flights instead of 1. And I heard a door, and I understood that she'd gone to her sister's floor to say something about it. That's the thing about that house. Nobody in it did anything quietly except me. The next Saturday, I went to Solyang, and Malsun was waiting for me with her hair done. She'd had it done. That's what I noticed. An 81-year-old woman with a bad hip had somebody set her hair for a conversation. "Close the door," she said. "Sit down properly." There was a bag on the bed beside her. Gray cloth, worn at the corners, the kind of thing that used to hold a handbok. "How much do you know about your grandmother's estate?" There wasn't one. The company was mortgaged. The house went to my father. There was some cash. I shrugged. Young-soo handled it. I was 21. "Your grandmother owned 41% of Hanho Logistics on the day she died," Malsun said. "It was never sold, never transferred, and it has never been voted. I want to describe what that does to you. It doesn't feel like a revelation. It feels like a floor giving way at one corner, and you're still standing, and you're waiting to find out how much of the rest of it is going to go. That's not possible. There'd have been probate. There was probate. That block went into a testamentary trust." She had her hands flat on the bag. "The will has a condition. The block passes to the youngest grandson to you on the day both of the elder grandsons have married. The room had a radiator that ticked. That's what I remember. Both of them married last year," I said. "March and September. Why would she write that?" And Malsun looked at me with something that wasn't pity, exactly. "Because she watched those 2 boys from the time they could walk," she said, "and she knew what they'd marry for, and she wanted you to have something on the day they did it. She said, they'll never let him go while he's cheap. Make him expensive." I sat on the plastic stool. There's a second condition, she said. There's a time limit. The original will has to be presented to the notary within 3 years of the second marriage. The copy and probate is a certified extract, with the conditions sealed. It can't be executed off the extract. It needs the original. That's how she wrote it, on purpose, because she didn't trust a document your brothers could reach. Where's the original? Malsoon opened the gray bag. She took out an envelope, brown, soft at the corners from 11 years of being kept, with a red seal on the flap that had been broken once and repaired with tape by somebody with paper over wire hands. She did not give it to me. She held it in her lap. She gave it to me 8 days before she died, she said. She said, Malsoona, I can't send this to him. If I send it, they'll get to him first. They'll talk him into signing something. They'll make him grateful. He has to come and get it himself. If he never comes, then I was wrong about him, and it doesn't matter anyway. So I moved to the nearest care home to that boy's office, and I waited 11 years, and I ate hospital rice, and I did not send one letter. I couldn't say anything. 14 months ago, she said, a young man came in with wet rice sacks. The radiator ticked. What's the date? I said. The 3 years. What's the last date? She told me. I did the arithmetic on my fingers out loud like a child because my hands had stopped working properly. September, October, November, December. And I got to the number and I said it, and then I said it again. Quieter, as if the second time might come out different. 81 days. Sari took me out on the water that night. I don't know how she found out. Yuna, probably, or Malsoon called the house. Nobody said. She was just there at the bottom of the side stair at 11 o'clock with a jacket over her pajamas and her car keys, and she said, "Get in." And I got in. Han Marine has a launch berthed at a private pontoon in Gyeongseodong. She drove it herself badly at about 11 knots, out past the yellow buoy where you can turn and look back at the port. Terminal 4 at midnight is the ugliest, most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Sodium orange all the way down. The cranes lit up like church, the water black and moving. She cut the engine. "Scream," she said. "What?" "You've been carrying that around all day with your face doing absolutely nothing. There's no one out here. Scream at them." "I'm not going to scream. You're allowed to." "I know I'm allowed to." I sat down on the bench along the gunwale. "I just don't. It's not a policy. It's not. Nothing comes up. There's a thing where the scream should be, and it's not there. It hasn't been there for a long time." Sari sat down next to me, not close, about a hand's width. "When our parents died," she said, "I broke every plate in the kitchen, every single one at a time, on the floor. Yuna stood in the doorway and watched me do it, and then she got the dustpan." She pulled her jacket tighter. "She hasn't cried once. Not at the funeral, not since. 11 years. And people think that means she's fine and I'm the mess. It's the other way around. I'm fine. I got it out on the plates." The launch moved under us. 81 days, I said. "I know. I don't want the company. I know that too." She turned her head. "That's the problem with you, actually. It'd be so much easier if you wanted something. Everybody I've ever met wants something and you can see it on them. It's the first thing you learn in a family like ours. And then there's you, standing in a car park, refusing 50,000 won like it's radioactive." "That's not." "Don't," she said. And then she kissed me. Not carefully. She got a handful of my collar and pulled, the way you'd pull a line, and she was cold from the wind and her hair had salt in it, and it lasted about 4 seconds. And then she let go of my collar and sat back, and put both hands flat on her own knees like she'd been told to. I didn't say anything, because there was nothing in me that was going to come out in the right order. "Okay," she said to the water. "I'm going to say this once, and then we're going back, and you can do whatever you want with it. I'm not going to pretend that was the wind or the boat or a moment. I did it on purpose, and I'd do it again on the way back in. Sari, I know about my sister." She said it evenly. "She hasn't said a word to me, and she never will. And I've known since the night you wouldn't take the keycard, because she came home and told me about a man who said no to her. And she told me twice. Yuna doesn't tell me anything twice." The wind came round, and the launch swung a bit on the tide. "So we both know," she said. "And I'm not going to be delicate about it, and she's not going to be loud about it, and you're going to be somewhere in the middle getting crushed, and I'm sorry about that in advance." She started the engine. Coming back in, past the pontoon, you can see the house on the hill in Yeonhui-dong if you know which one it is. It's the one with the flat roof and the old pine. There was a light on in the corner window on the second floor. It was on when we left. It was on when we got back at 1:30. And when I came up the side stair, that light went off, before I got to the third floor landing, at the exact moment my foot hit the step where the wood creaks. 11 days after I moved into that house, Yuna put me in front of her board. She didn't warn me. That's not cruelty. That's how she operates. She told me on Tuesday morning that there was a meeting at 10 and that I'd be presenting the transit account. And when I asked which transit account, she said ours with Hanho and went to answer her phone. Han Marine's boardroom has 9 chairs and a table made out of one piece of something. The men in it had all known the Han sisters' father. 2 of them had known their grandfather. Director Im spoke before I'd sat down. Is this the yard hire? This is the reefer desk, Yuna said. He's been here 5 weeks. 6. He's a son. Yes, she said, and sat down and opened her folder, which in that room is the same as saying the discussion is over. Which it wasn't, obviously. Men like him don't stop, they just move sideways. Then I'd like it minutied, he said, that the Hanho account is being reviewed by a member of the Hanho family, at a time when Hanho is in negotiation with Taesung Capital, and that if this ends up in front of a regulator, the timeline will look precisely as bad as it sounds. Fair, honestly. I'd have said the same thing. I put the paper down the middle of the table. Not a deck. 4 pages, stapled, and 1 A3 sheet folded in half. Then let's minute this too, I said. I'm not asking you to trust me. Everything on these pages is from your system, and every line has the query reference next to it. So anyone here can run it themselves before lunch and find out whether I'm lying. Im didn't touch the paper. 2 others did. Here's what was on it. Hanho Logistics had been running reefer transit through Terminal 4 for 11 years. 310 sailings a year, give or take. And for the last 3 years, the average load factor on those units had been 61%. 61, in a business where the break-even is about 78. They were shipping air. Not once, not on a bad quarter as a policy, for 3 years on a route that had been profitable for 8 years before that. Why? Said the youngest man at the table. A finance director called Baek. Because the units are leased, I said. In 2022, Hanho signed a 4-year lease on 80 reefer units through a leasing company. It's a fixed monthly cost. If you've paid for 80 units, you sail 80 units. Because sailing 60 makes your utilization number look bad in the monthly pack, even though it makes your margin look good. Somebody at Hanho decided the utilization number was the one that mattered. Who's the lesser? Yuna said. She already knew. She'd known for months. She wanted them to hear me say it. Kyungin Equipment Finance, I said, which is 94% owned by Taesung Capital. Nobody said anything for a moment. So my brother's father-in-law leases him containers he can't fill. I said, at a rate nobody has renegotiated in 4 years, and Hanho eats about 900 million won a year to keep the relationship warm. That 900 million comes out of the transit margin, and the transit margin is the number Hanho uses to argue for rate discounts from this terminal. You've given them 4 rate concessions since 2023. Every one of them was justified with a margin number that was being destroyed on purpose, upstairs, by a lease with the investor's own subsidiary. Director Im finally picked up the paper. You're accusing. I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm telling you your customers' costs are structured to make your rates look expensive, and I'm telling you where to look. I unfolded the A3. This is the load factor by sailing for 36 months. That's your rate concessions marked in red. Draw your own line. I didn't say another word for the next 40 minutes. They fought about it among themselves, which is what you want. The second you defend a number, it becomes your number instead of the truth. At the end, Im said to Yuna, not to me, where did he get the lease terms? Public filings, I said. Kyungin files consolidated. The equipment schedule's an appendix. Nobody reads appendices. You read appendices? I worked nights for 5 years, I said. There's not a lot on. Afterwards, Yuna walked me back down through the yard, which she does not do with anyone. And near row C, she stopped and took out her phone and typed something, and my phone buzzed. Full system credentials. Her own. Not a guest account. Not a read-only view. Her login, her authority, everything Han Marine has, including the rate cards and the customer files, and 11 years of what her father and then she had built. That's a mistake, I said. Probably. You've known me 6 weeks. 7. She put the phone away. I've never given that to anyone. Not to Im, who ran this terminal when I was in school. Not to my sister. So understand what I'm doing and don't be gracious about it. I hate gracious. Then what do you want me to be? Careful, Yuna said. Be extremely careful, because if you're wrong about a single thing you put in front of that room, they will not come for you. They'll come for me, and they've been waiting 11 years for the reason. She went back up the ramp. I stood in row C for a while with my phone in my hand. I'd like to say I felt something dramatic. What I actually felt was the specific unpleasant sensation of a debt arriving in a currency I couldn't pay off with money. So I set the terms that night in the kitchen with both of them. I'd thought about how to say it, and I said it badly. I need rules. Sari was on the counter with a bowl of something. Oh, good rules. 1. Nothing gets paid for me without me knowing what it costs. Not a dinner, not a coat, not a hospital bill, Nothing. 2. 2. If either of you ever settles that loan for me, I leave that night. I mean it. I'll go to the terminal cabins and I won't come back. Yuna by the window said nothing. 3. This was the one I'd been building to. You don't do anything to my brothers on my behalf. Not commercially, not privately, not a phone call to a friend. If they get hit, it's because of what they did, and it goes through paper, and my name is on it. Sari put the bowl down. That's a stupid rule. It's the only one that isn't negotiable. Why? Because in 6 months I want to be able to stand in a room with them, I said, and know that not one single thing that happened to them was a favor somebody did for me because they liked my face. That landed somewhere it wasn't supposed to. Sari went very still. Right, she said. Your face. I didn't mean, no you did. She got off the counter. You think that's what this is? You think we found a good-looking man sleeping in a container yard and got sentimental about it? Sari, there's a coat in your room, she said. The navy one on the hook. I put it there 4 days ago and you haven't touched it, and I know exactly why. So go and get it. I went and got it. It was a good coat. Wool, heavy, the kind with the collar that actually closes. It had been in my room since the cold came in, and I had gone out into a 9-degree yard every night in a fleece with a torn cuff and left it hanging there, because I had a rule. She took it out of my hands and held it up. 840,001, she said. There. Now you know what it costs per Rule 1. It's the ugliest thing I've ever bought, and I hate it, and I'm not taking it back to the shop, so it's going to hang on that hook until it goes out of fashion. And every night when you go out in that torn fleece, you can walk past it and feel excellent about yourself. She put it back in my arms and went upstairs. Yuna was still by the window. Was there a 4th rule, she said? No. Good. Then I have one. She turned around. Don't manage us. You've spent your whole life managing people so they don't have to feel anything inconvenient about you. Whatever you do here, don't do that. Teo found me on the 12th of November, at the port, in the middle of the afternoon. He'd been waiting by the gate office for 2 hours. The guard told me afterwards he'd bought coffee for everyone in the hut twice and made 3 phone calls where he walked out to the fence to talk. My middle brother had lost weight. He had a good suit on, and the collar was loose on him, and there was a small cut on his jaw from shaving with a bad hand. Can we? He gestured. Somewhere. We went to the pontoon. It was cold. I didn't offer him anything. He talked for 11 minutes about how it had all got out of control, about how it was Jungzu's plan and he'd only handled the account transfers, about how he'd argued for me, actually argued at the table, with father-in-law present, and got shouted down, about how the Jeju branch would genuinely have been fine, a real job. And did I know Jungzu had drafted a 2-year rotation for me? He had it somewhere. He could send it. He got out a folder. Inside was a deed of family settlement, acknowledgement of receipt of consideration, waiver of all present and future claims against Hanho Logistics and its shareholders, confidentiality, no admission of liability. Consideration was 300 million won. It's real money, Jae-ho. It's a flat. It's you starting over. I looked at the paper for a while. 3 questions, I said. You answer them and I'll read the whole thing tonight properly. Okay. What's on the 22nd of December? His hands stopped moving. I don't know what you mean. You said I shouldn't still have been here in October. What happens after October? That was Jae-ho. I was upset. I said a thing. Second question. Who at the bank pushed the biometric onboarding for a 12 million won loan in my name on the 11th? And which branch approved it without a callback? Nothing. Third, I put the folder down on the bollard between us. In this settlement on page 4, there's a schedule listing the claims I'm waiving. It lists 7. 6 of them are wage and employment claims. The 7th says, any and all claims arising under the estate of Sun Gyum-sun, whether vested, contingent, or future. I looked up. If there's nothing in that estate for me, why is it in the schedule? Teo looked at the water, then at the gate, then at his shoes. Because lawyers put everything in, he said. That's the answer you're going with. Jae-ho. It's fine. I picked up the folder and handed it back to him. I said I'd read it tonight, so give me a copy and I will. But you should know that I already know, Hyung, and I've known for 11 days. And I've been standing here for the whole conversation waiting for you to be the one who told me. He didn't take the folder. He stood on that pontoon with his hands at his sides and he said, in a voice I hadn't heard since we were children, and he broke a window and blamed the neighbor's kid. You weren't supposed to find out. Nobody was hurt. If you'd just gone to Jeju, you'd have got Jungsu would have made you a director in 3 years. He actually said that. After December, Teo said. Then he hurt himself. I want to be honest about what I felt at that exact second. Because it wasn't triumph. It was a kind of exhaustion, Because I'd known him for 31 years, and I'd just watched him hand me the thing that would end him, out of nothing more complicated than being tired and wanting somebody to say it was all right. He grabbed my sleeve on the way out. "Don't record this. Jaho, tell me you're not." I took my phone out of my jacket pocket and showed him the screen. Voice memo. 11:42. Still running. "You should get your own lawyer," I said. "Not the family one. There's a difference, and nobody's going to explain it to you." The loan escalated on the 15th. A man came to the terminal gate with a folder and asked for me by name at the guard hut, which is how they do it. They don't call, they come where you work. Because the whole product is embarrassment. I took him to the canteen and bought him a coffee, which confused him, and I said, "I'm going to be straightforward with you. Because you're the fourth person this month who's had to do somebody else's dirty job in front of me, and the other three at least had the decency to be uncomfortable about it." Then I put things on the table one at a time. Copy of my building access log for the 11th of the month, showing me badged into Terminal 4 gate from 1840 to 0620. A statement from the gate guard, the dead phone I'd kept it, the old one, with the SIM, because at some point that month I'd started keeping everything. The onboarding for that loan was done with a facial scan at 22:14 on the 11th. "That's not me," I said, "and I'm not going to argue with your company about it. I'm going to file a report with the Financial Supervisory Service, and I'm going to name your branch manager, and you're going to go back and tell them that I did it politely." The man drank his coffee. He was about 50, and he had a small daughter's drawing folded in the front of his folder, sticking out, which he'd clearly forgotten was there. "Do you know who did it?" he said. "Yes. Family?" I didn't answer that. He put the folder away and stood up, and at the door of the canteen he said, "For what it's worth, that's the second one this quarter from that branch. Both 12 million, both biometric." That's a detail I filed and did nothing with for 4 weeks. It matters later. I did file the report. It took 11 days and 4 appointments and a great deal of standing in queues, and Yuna never once offered to have Han Marine's legal department handle it, which cost her something, and I noticed, and I never said. I went back to Nambu Terminal in the middle of all that, not for any reason a therapist would approve of. I had a night off, and I got as far as the front of the house and then walked down the hill instead, and took the subway across the city and stood at the west entrance at 11:30 at night, like a man visiting a grave. Mr. Gu was on the third bench, same bag. He'd got a proper coat somewhere. He looked me up and down, the boots, the port jacket with the Han Marine crest on it, the fact that I'd eaten regularly for 6 weeks, and he said, "Well." I sat down. The 6 inches were still there. I'd brought 2 coffees and a bag of the buns he'd shared with me, which was clumsy, and we both knew it, and he took one and ate it and didn't say thank you correctly. "So it wasn't a misunderstanding," he said. "No. And now what? You've got lawyers? I've got a paper in a care home in Namyangju in 18 days. He thought about that. Then he said the thing I've quoted more than anything anyone else said to me that whole year. "When you get it, don't take the meeting." "What meeting?" "There's always a meeting." He wiped his hands on his knees. "At the end, when they've lost, they'll ask for one. Family, hotel lobby, somebody's wife crying. Everyone will tell you it's the mature thing. That's where they get it back off you." He shrugged. I took the meeting. 31 years in Ansen and a brother-in-law with a good voice. "Don't take the meeting." I've thought about that man more than my own father. They argued that night. My rooms are on the 3rd floor, and the stairwell in that house carries sound up like a chimney. I've never told either of them that. Something about the flotilla schedule, something about who signs for the fuel contract. Then it wasn't. You went and got him in the rain. Somebody had to. You went at 9, Sari. You knew at noon. So did you. A chair moved. You knew at noon, and you sat up in that office with your pencils, and you waited to see if he'd break, because that's how you learn what people are made of. And it never once occurred to you that a man might be under a metal roof at Terminal 4 with a dead phone while you were conducting your little experiment. That's not... Then why didn't you go? A long pause. Long enough that I stopped on the landing. Because he'd have got in the car, Yuna said. That's the point. No. He'd have got in my car because I employ him, and he'd have spent the whole drive working out what it cost him. Something set down on wood. He got in yours because you didn't ask him for anything. I can't do that. I don't have that. Everything I give a person comes with my name printed on it. The house made its noises. So you sent me, Sari said slowly. I didn't send you. You called me at 8:30 and said the cabins had cleared. You've never in your life told me about a cabin roster, Sari. You sent me to go and get the man you want because you'd rather lose him to me than have him think you bought him. Her voice cracked on the last part, and it was the only time in this entire story I heard that happen to her. You know what's disgusting about that? It's the kindest thing you've ever done for me, and I can't even have it. A door. The other door 11 seconds later. I stood on the landing in the dark for a long time, And then I went up and lay on the bed with my shoes on. In the morning, there was coffee on the hall table at 5 past 5, flask, cap loosened, sticky note. Sari came down at 7 and ate half my toast and complained that I burn it on purpose. They were flawless. That's what I couldn't stand. Chairman Park Dong-hoon invited me to lunch on the 18th. Not through Jung-soo. His secretary called Han Marine's switchboard and asked for me by name and department, which is a message in itself. The restaurant was in Hanam, one of those places where the corridor is longer than the dining room. He stood up when I came in. He poured my water. He asked about the reefer desk with real questions, like a man who had actually read something, and for about 20 minutes it was the best conversation I'd had with anyone, over 60 in my life. Then the plates went away. Your grandmother, he said. I met her twice, 1998, and then at your grandfather's funeral. Formidable woman, rude to me both times. That sounds right. She structured that trust herself. Did you know that? Not the family lawyer. She went to a firm in Daegu that nobody in Seoul had ever used. He turned his glass a quarter turn. It took my people 6 months to find out that it existed. Your brothers had been telling me for 2 years that the share register was clean. They were lying to you. They were lying to everyone. It's what they're for. He said it without heat. Here's where we are, Sun Jae-ho. I have committed 240 billion won to a company whose share register has a hole in it. That hole is you. On the 22nd of December, it either closes forever or it opens. And I would very much prefer to know which before December rather than during. I'd imagine so. So, 400 billion is out of the question. Let's not do the dance. He put a card on the table, face down, the same way his son-in-law's terminal does it. 11 billion won for a signed disclaimer of the trust interest, executed before a notary this month. Paid in one installment, no conditions, no confidentiality clause, you can tell anyone you like. And separately, because I'm told you have a fondness for it, Taesung will endow the care home in Namyangju at 400 million a year for 10 years in your grandmother's name. And I'll have my daughter's foundation administer it so it isn't dependent on my mood. I sat there. 11 billion won is not a number that means anything. It's a number that turns into a shape in your head. My father's care forever. 41 old people fed until the last one dies. A life where nobody I know ever has to ask anyone for anything again. I want it on the record that I thought about it for a long time. No, I said. You haven't asked what happens if you say no. I know what happens. Say it then. I'd rather you had it from me than found it out in January. He was completely pleasant about it. That's what I keep coming back to. Han Marine Terminal 4 renews its Incheon Port Authority concession on the 4 berths in the Northern Basin in 18 months. There are 3 parties who will bid. 2 of them bank with us. The Han sisters' father built that terminal with a loan from my institution in 2009, and the covenants on the refinancing are, I'd say, unfashionably tight. None of that is a threat, Sun SI. It's simply the arithmetic of who owes what, and it would be arithmetic whether you and I had ever met. And if I sign, the arithmetic changes. If you sign, I have no reason to look at that terminal at all, he smiled. I'm a busy man. I look where there's a hole. I stood up. Chairman, you've told me twice that this isn't about me. Once about the arithmetic and once about the hole. I put my chair in. I've had a lot of people be reasonable at me this year. My brother did it in a lobby with his hand on my shoulder. You're better at it, and I mean that, but it's the same sentence, and I've heard it now. Park Dong-hoon looked up at me, and for 1 second there was something behind his face that I hadn't seen at any point in the previous 90 minutes. Your grandmother said something almost identical to me in 1998, he said. I've thought about it for 26 years. What did you do about it? I bought her supplier. He picked his napkin back up. Then I'll explain it to your brothers in a way they'll understand, he said. Goodbye, Sun Ses. Give my regards to Han Yuna. Tell her the concession file is on my desk, and she'll know I said it. And that's not a threat either. It's just true. I told them both that evening. All of it, in order, including the concession file, including the berths, including the 400 million a year for Soyang that I had turned down without asking anybody. Sari went out of the room and came back with a bottle and 3 glasses, which is not the reaction I'd budgeted for. 18 months, she said. The concession's in 18 months. Yes. And you said no this afternoon. Yes. She poured. She handed one to her sister, who didn't take it, and one to me, who did. Then he's already made his mistake, Sari said, because that man has never in his life had to explain to a room why the terminal he wanted got bid up by 400 old people in Namyangju. And I would very much like to be the one who makes him. Sari. I'm not doing anything to your brothers. That's your rule, and it's a stupid rule, and I'm keeping it. She drank. Park Dong-hoon isn't your brother. Yuna hadn't moved from the window. You should have taken the 11 billion, she said. The room went quiet in a particular way. You'd have been free of it, all of it, in an afternoon. Father's care, The old woman's home, your loan, us. She turned round. That was the exit. There won't be another one that clean, and by January you'll be in a fight with a man who has never lost one, and I want it on the record in this room that I told you to take the money and walk. Do you want me to take it? No, Yuna said. And that's exactly why I had to say it out loud. She picked up the third glass then, and drank about a third of it standing up, and put it down, and said goodnight at 9:40 in the evening like a woman leaving a board meeting. Sari waited until the stairs stopped. She's been drafting the concession bid since August, she said. 200 pages. She was going to lose it anyway, and she's never told a soul, including me. So, when she says take the money, that was her handing you the lifeboat off a ship she's already standing on. She finished her glass. Anyway, she said, that's not why I'm angry. You're angry? You went to lunch with him alone. She put the glass in the sink hard. 11 billion won and a threat and a nice old man saying your grandmother's name at you. And you sat through the whole thing by yourself. And then you came home and did the persimmons before you told us. She stood with her back to me at the sink for a second. You keep doing that. You keep going into rooms alone. One day one of those rooms won't let you out, and neither of us will even know which building you're in. The Chionin incident happened 4 nights later, and it's the reason I'll never be able to be objective about that woman as long as I live. 2:10. A Hanho box comes off the ship with a damaged genset mount, and nobody flags it. By 0240, it's in row H, third tier, plugged, drawing hard and dying. At 03 glitch, it takes the phase down on that section of the ring main. 11 reefers gone dark, including 6 pharma boxes with a consignee who has an audit clause with teeth. I called it in. Yuna was there in 26 minutes, in jeans, with her hair wet. We worked it until 6. Her, me, 2 electricians, and the night foreman. She got up on the stack, actually climbed, in the dark, in the rain, 40-year-old owner of the terminal, to read a set point display that the tablet couldn't reach. At 4:30 it was done, and the boxes were on generator carts, and the temperature logs had a 9-minute deviation on 4 units and a 14-minute on 2. And 14 is inside the consignee's tolerance if, and only if, the deviation report is submitted with the cargo, honestly, that morning. We sat in the tower with the lights off, because neither of us wanted to look at anything bright. 14 minutes, Yuna said. If we log it as 9 across the board, nobody ever knows. The consignee's QA won't pull raw data on a past load. That's not even unusual in this industry. It's Tuesday. I know. Say it anyway. We log 14, I said, and we call them before 9. That's about 80 million won. Yes, all right. She put her head back against the wall. Then she talked. I don't know why that night, the dark probably, and being tired past the point where you can hold a face on. She told me she was 22 when their parents died on a road in Gangwon, that she took the terminal because there was nobody else, and the bank wanted an answer in 11 days. That M had run it for her for 2 years while she learned, and had never once let her forget it. That she had been engaged briefly at 26 to a man who was very kind to her and who she found out had asked her father's old accountant for a copy of the covenant schedule before he proposed. I broke it off and I paid for his sister's wedding anyway, she said, because I'd promised. And afterwards, everybody in this business said, there's Han Yuna. She's got ice in her. And I let them say it, because it's a good coat to wear in a bad year and I've never taken it off. Rain was coming down the tower glass in sheets. I want to tell you something and I want you to not respond to it, she said. Yuna, that's responding. I shut up. I have thought about the night you stood in the rain at Terminal 4 every day since it happened, she said. Not because you were pitiful. You weren't. You'd worked out that you could sit in the desk room and you'd made your peace with it, and you were entirely fine. And that's the part I can't get past. That you had already decided you didn't need anybody at 27 permanently, and you were right. And it was the worst thing I've ever watched a person be right about. She reached over and took my hand off my knee, not gently. She took it the way you take an instrument out of a case, and she held it in both of hers, in the dark, on the arm of the chair between us, and she looked straight ahead at the yard. I'm not going to kiss you, she said. My sister did that, and she did it honestly. And I'm not going to compete on that field, because if I do it once, I'll do it every night, and you'll get pulled apart between us. And I'd rather cut my hand off. Her thumb moved once across my knuckles and stopped. So this is what I've got, she said. This is all of it, and I'm asking for one thing only, which is that when you know whichever way it goes, her or me or neither, you tell me straight away. Don't manage me. Don't wait for a good moment. There isn't going to be one. We sat like that until it got light enough to see the cranes. Then she let go and stood up and said, send the deviation report at 8. Copy me and copy him, and put your name on it, not mine. At the door she stopped. I meant what I said about not responding, she said. You're going to want to say something kind now. Don't. I'd rather have nothing than something kind. Everything I did to my brothers, I did in public, and none of it was mine. That's the part people get wrong when they hear this story. I didn't destroy Hanwha Logistics. I couldn't have. I had no shares yet, no board seat, no money, and no lawyers. What I had was 11 years of other people's paperwork and a habit of reading appendices. First, the deviation report. 8 in the morning, my name on it, full raw logs, 14 minutes disclosed. The consignee's QA director called me personally at 11, not to complain, to ask why we'd told them. I said because you'd have found out in March, and then you'd have had to leave. 2 days later, that same QA director sent his own auditor to look at his own supply chain, and the auditor's scope included the whole Hanwha reefer fleet. And the auditor found the 61% load factor and the lease with Kyungin, and the auditor wrote it up. Not for me. For his client, in a normal report, in normal language, and he sent a copy to the port authority because that's the protocol. Second, the insurers. Once a Korean port has an independent audit on file describing systematically underloaded reefer sailings on leased units, the underwriter re-rates the account at renewal. Hanwha's marine cargo premium went up 31% on the 14th of December. Nobody at Han Marine made a phone call about it. It's a formula in a spreadsheet in an office in Uido. Third, Han Marine's board withdrew the 4-rate concessions. That one they did on their own in a meeting I wasn't in, with Director Im proposing it, the same man who wanted my presence minuted. He voted to withdraw them because the numbers had been wrong for 3 years and he had signed off on every one of them. And Im is a lot of things, but he is not a man who lets somebody else find his mistake twice. The 3 things together moved Hanwha's transit cost per box by about 19% inside 5 weeks. That's nothing in a good year. In a company that has just committed to a new bonded facility in Pyeongtaek, on the assumption of a second tranche from an investor who is now looking at an audit trail with his own subsidiary's name in it. It's the whole world. Taesung deferred the second tranche on the December 19th, pending clarification of the share register. Jung-soo called me at 21:04 that night. I was in the kitchen in Yeonhui-dong, cutting persimmons for Malsun's weekend bag with a pair of old kitchen scissors, and the phone lit up on the counter with a name that had not been on my screen since a lobby in Songpa. Hyung, Jung-soo. Sari looked at it, then at me. I finished the persimmon, put it in the box, wiped the blade on the cloth. Because you don't put those scissors away wet, grandmother would take them off you. The phone went to voicemail on its own. 20 seconds later, it started again. You could just find out what he wants, Sari said. I know what he wants. You don't. You know what he needs. That's different. And you've been 3 weeks ahead of that man since November. And the one thing you've never once done in your life is let him talk while you already have the paper. She had a point. She usually did, and she always made it while eating something off my plate. I turned the phone face down on the counter anyway. Is the car free at 7 tomorrow? I said. I need to get to Namyangju before the notary opens. The notice went up at Solyang on the 23rd of November, taped to the glass of the front door where every resident could read it on the way to breakfast. Building sale completed. New owner. SJ Asset Development Co. L. Ipati. All occupancy agreements terminated with 60 days notice. Vacate by 22nd of December. 22nd of December. Mrs. O had it down off the glass by the time I got there, but somebody had already photographed it, and it was going around the residents' families on a group chat. And by 10 in the morning, there were 4 adult children in the corridor shouting at a woman who earns $2.8 million a month. SJ Asset Development had been incorporated in October with capital of 10 million won. Its registered address was a shared office in Gangnam. Its sole director was a 26-year-old woman who, when a reporter eventually called her, turned out to be a junior employee at a Taesung Capital portfolio company who had signed some papers for her team leader. They didn't buy a care home, they bought a lever for about 1 billion won, which for that man is what a nice watch is for other people. I understood the message immediately, and so did everyone else. Move the old woman before the 22nd. And see how well she keeps a document while she's being moved. Mrs. O sat in her office and cried for about 90 seconds and then stopped and asked me what we were going to do. Because at some point in 14 months I had become, without any conversation about it, the person you ask. 41 residents, she said. 11 are on oxygen. 4 are end of life. The nearest facility with capacity is in Chuncheon and they'll take 9. I made 2 calls. The first was to Yuna, who listened for 40 seconds and said, Warehouse 3 is empty. It's heated. It's clean, it's got a sprinkler certificate and a working canteen, and it is completely unsuitable for elderly people. And I can have it licensed as temporary accommodation in about 9 days if the district office likes me, which they don't. How much? Don't. Rule 1. A pause on the line. 2.4 million a month, which is the internal transfer rate for that space, Yuna said. It'll be on your payslip. Now stop wasting my morning. The second call was to Sari, and she didn't pick up because she was already in the car. We moved 41 people in 3 days. I've done a lot of logistics. Nothing I have ever done was harder than that, and nothing I have ever done was less like a story. There is no montage. There is a woman in room 12 who will not go without her husband's radio, and the radio does not work, and there is no time to explain why the radio can't be plugged in on the truck. So you sit on the end of her bed and hold the radio for 4 minutes while she tells you about a summer in 1974. There is Mr. Yang, 90, deaf in one ear, who kept getting out of the chair to help. There is an oxygen concentrator that needs a dedicated circuit and an electrician who says he can come Thursday, and it's Monday. And Sari stands in the middle of Warehouse 3, with her phone and calls 11 electricians and gets 9 no's, and then finds one in Bupyeong who says he's retired, and she drives to Bupyeong. She came back with him at 9:30 at night. He was 71. He worked till 3 in the morning and would not take money, so she bought him a set of tires for his van instead, and had them fitted while he slept in the canteen. And when he found out in the morning, he shouted at her for 6 minutes in a dialect I couldn't follow, and then hugged her. Yuna did it differently. Yuna did not come down to the warehouse for the first 2 days. She sat in the tower and got a temporary occupancy license out of a district office that does not issue temporary occupancy licenses by finding, in 11 years of terminal paperwork, a 2019 emergency shelter designation that had never been revoked, and by putting a 200-page file in front of a civil servant so complete that saying no would have taken him longer than saying yes. She came down on the 3rd night when it was done, walked the whole floor once. 41 beds, curtains between them, the canteen doing rice porridge at 11 at night, and said nothing to anyone and left. Sari found me by the loading door afterwards. She's been crying in the stairwell, she said. Yuna, don't ever tell her I told you. She lit a cigarette, which I'd never seen her do and never saw again. She does it about twice a decade, and then she'd rather die than be seen. So we're not going to be kind to her about it tomorrow. We're going to be completely normal, and it's going to be the hardest thing either of us does this week. Malsun gave me the envelope on the last night in the old building. Her room was stripped. Bed frame, a chair, the gray cloth bag. She'd made them leave her till last, and Mrs. O had given up arguing about it 2 days earlier. Sit down properly, she said. Not on the edge. I sat. They came here, she said. Wednesday, 2 of them in a car. Not your brothers, men. They asked at the desk for the resident who used to work for the Sun family. Mrs. O told them she'd have to check the records and went and stood in the toilet for 10 minutes. Why didn't you call me? Because you'd have come, Malsun said, and then they'd have known which room. She put the bag on her knees. I'm 81, she said. In a warehouse, with a curtain, with 40 other people who all know my business by Friday. I can't keep this any longer. It stops being safe with me tonight. She took out the envelope. Brown, soft-cornered, red seal broken once, and taped by hand. She held it out flat on both palms, which is how you hand something to a person you've decided is above you, and I have never in my life been so embarrassed by a gesture. Ajumeoni. Take it before I drop it, my hands aren't good in the evening. I took it. It weighed nothing. 4 pages of paper in 11 years. There's a thing I have to tell you, she said, and then I want to go to bed. Your grandmother didn't do this for you. She did it against them. Those are not the same, and I've watched you all year deciding that you're not the sort of man who takes what's his. And I'd like you to stop being that man by Tuesday because I did 11 years of hospital rice for it. I sat there with the envelope on my knees. I'll open it with the notary. Open it now. Why? Because I have never read it, Malsun said, and I would like to have read it once. So we read it together. In an empty room, an old woman and me, off 2 pages held between us under a ceiling light that had a dead moth in it. The language was ordinary. That's what got me. No speeches. Clause 4b, the block of shares, the condition, the date, the 3-year window, executed and witnessed at a firm in Daegu in the spring of 2015. And then at the bottom of the 2nd page, in her own hand, in the space where the drafters had left the personal declaration, 4 lines. To my youngest grandson, I am not giving you a company. You will find it dull and you are better than it. I am giving you the ability to say no to your brothers on a Tuesday afternoon, which is the only thing I ever wanted for myself and never had. If you have this in your hands, then Malsun kept her word, in which case give her whatever she asks for. And if she asks for nothing, give her more. Malsun read it twice. Her face did not move. Then she folded the page along the crease. Exactly the way you fold something you've been handling professionally for 50 years, and she said, well, she was rude to the end, and she turned her face to the wall, and that's all she gave me, and I think it was everything she had. There was a storm on the 4th of December, not a poetic one, a miserable low that came across from the Yellow Sea and took out power to about 11,000 households in western Seoul at 9 at night, including a house in Yeonhwi-dong with a flat roof and an old pine. I was in the kitchen with a torch and the fuse box when Sari came down with a candle and a jam jar. And then Yuna came down with her laptop, which had 40 minutes of battery, and which she put on the table and then remarkably closed. We sat in the dark around a kitchen table. We had bread and a slab of cheese and the last of a bottle from the night I turned down 11 billion won, and outside the wind was moving the pine, and the house did the noises it does. Sari asked me what my father was like. I said he'd had a stroke 4 years ago and lived in a facility in Yongin and didn't speak, and that I'd visited every second Sunday for 4 years, and that after the 22nd of last month, my name had been removed from the approved visitor list. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Sari put her hand flat on the table, not touching me, just there. "Can we fix that?" she said. "I've applied through the facility. It'll take a while. It's a form." "That's not what I asked." "I know." Yuna refilled my glass without being asked and said, "What was he like before?" "Quiet. He wasn't a bad man. He did what my mother decided, and my mother did what Young-soo wanted, because Young-soo was the one who was going to look after everybody. And by the time it was obvious that wasn't true, she'd been dead 2 years. I hadn't said that out loud before. It came out flat, the way facts do. Then Sari said, "Okay, my turn," and told us about breaking the plates, which Yuna had never heard her tell to anyone. And Yuna, after a long time, told us what she'd been doing on the night their parents died, which was sitting an exam she could have deferred, and that she got a 94 on it, and that she has never once been able to see that number without feeling sick. The wind got up around 11. I don't know how to write the next part without it turning into something it wasn't. There was no seduction in it. Nobody had a plan. It's just that at some point Sari had moved along the bench so her shoulder was against mine. And at some point after that Yuna, on the other side, had put 2 fingers on the back of my wrist on the table. And I was sitting between them in a dark kitchen with a candle and a jam jar. And I was aware of exactly one thing, which was that neither of them was going to move first, ever, because they had both decided independently that it would be unfair. That's what I couldn't stand. Not the wanting, the fairness. "I need to say something," I said. "No, you don't," said Sari. "I do. And you're both going to hate it, and I'd rather say it in the dark." Yuna's fingers didn't move. "I don't know what I can feel," I said. "That's the whole sentence. I'm not being noble, and I'm not stalling either of you. I'm 27, and I've never once been in a room where somebody wanted something from me that wasn't useful. Not one time. So there's a thing in me where that machinery should be, and I've had 4 months of you both being this, and I still can't tell you what's happening in there. Some days I think there's nothing, and I've been broken since I was 14. And some days I come up that hill at midnight, and there's a light on in the corner window, and my whole chest goes wrong. And I don't know what that is, and I'm not going to name it to make either of you feel better. The candle did what candles do." "That was the honest version," I said. "You can have the kind version if you want. I've got one. It's much nicer." "Don't you dare," said Yuna. Sari laughed. Once wetly. "Right," she said. She pushed her hair back with both hands, which is a thing my brother does, and I've never been able to explain why it undid me from her. "So, we teach you." "Sari." "No, I'm serious, and I've thought about it, and I've thought about it a lot more than is dignified." She turned toward me on the bench. "You've never had it, so you don't recognize it. Fine. And you get it every day, from both of us, in enormous quantity, until you can tell the difference between a person being useful to you and a person being glad you're in the room. And at the end of that, if it turns out the machinery really is broken, then it's broken, and we'll all have been very stupid, and I'd still rather have done it than not. And if it isn't broken," Yuna said, "then one of us loses." "Yes. Say it properly." "Then one of us loses," Sari said, "and it'll probably be me, and I'd like it on the record that I already know that and I'm doing it anyway." Yuna took her fingers off my wrist. She stood up, and she put the cheese away, and she washed the knife. In the dark, in a house with no power, because that woman cannot sit still inside a feeling. "There'll be no losing this month," she said with her back to us. "This month there's a notary." On the 16th of December, 6 days out, Jung-soo stopped being clever. At 8:40, the Seongdong District Police contacted me and asked me to come in regarding a report of theft of a document from a private residence. The complainant was Sun Jung-soo, on behalf of the estate of the late Sun Gyum-soon. The alleged stolen item was described as an original testamentary instrument, believed removed from the family residence in 2015 by a former domestic employee. 2 hours later, a process server presented an application at the notary's office in Namyangju for an injunction restraining any dealing with the said instrument pending resolution. If it had worked, it would have run past the 22nd. That's all it had to do. Not win. Just take 6 days. Here's what my brother didn't know. He didn't know that I'd had a lawyer for 5 weeks, not Han Marines, a woman in Mapo who does trusts and estates and had never heard of any of us, whom I found by reading 3 years of published probate rulings and picking the name that kept winning. Her retainer was 11 million won. I paid it out of a salary of 4 million for a month by not paying anything else. And by the 16th of December, I owed her about 8 of it, and she was fine about it, and she was the single best purchase of my life. He didn't know I had a recording of Tayo saying after December on a pontoon. He didn't know that Malsoon had given a videotaped deposition on the 28th of November, in the presence of that lawyer and an independent witness, at a table in Warehouse 3 with a curtain behind her, in which an 81-year-old woman with a bad hip stated her name and her employment history, and the date and place the envelope was given to her, and answered 14 questions about it without a single error. And he didn't know the thing that ended it, which is that his own lawyers, in filing the police report, had to attach a description of the instrument they claimed was stolen. To describe it, they had to prove it existed. To prove it existed, they attached the certified probate extract, the one with the condition sealed, and out of thoroughness, the firm's own 2015 engagement note. The engagement note recorded that the original had been delivered to the client's nominated custodian at the client's instruction. My grandmother's own lawyers had documented the handover 11 years ago, and my brother's lawyers put it in front of a judge, because he told them to move fast, and because when you are certain nobody will check, you stop checking. The application was dismissed on the 18th. The theft report was withdrawn on the 19th. My lawyer called me at 7 in the evening and said, "Bring it in on the 22nd, first appointment. And don't take it out of your hands between now and then." Where do I keep it for 3 days? Where do you sleep? With 2 women who would both physically fight a man for it. She said, "Then you've got better security than most banks," and hung up. We went to the notary on the 22nd of December at 9 in the morning. Not a scene. I want to be accurate about it, because everybody expects a courtroom, and it was a small office above a pharmacy in Namyangju with a photocopier that beeped. Malsoon came, she insisted. And she made Sari stop at a shop on the way so she could buy a scarf, because she wasn't going to a legal office looking like a resident of anywhere. Yuna drove. She didn't say one word for the whole hour, and she took the corners like a woman transporting an organ. My lawyer met us at the door. The notary was 60, bored, professional, and treated the entire thing as what it was to him, a Thursday. Envelope, seal, identification. The instrument examined page by page against the certified extract, the marriage certificates of both elder grandsons obtained and lodged, the declaration of the custodian, signatures. At 9:52, he stamped it and said, in the flattest voice in Korea, "The condition is satisfied. The interest vests. 41% of Hanho Logistics." I want to tell you what I felt, and the truthful answer is that I was watching Malsoon, who had her hands flat on her handbag and was looking at the notary with an expression of absolute professional attention, like a woman finally watching a delivery sign for. Outside on the stairs, Sari hugged me and then let go too fast, because her sister was behind us. Yuna shook my hand, formally, on a staircase above a pharmacy and said, "Congratulations, son S.I., and I have never wanted to grab anybody more in my life." Now the part that everybody argues with me about. At 11 that morning in my lawyer's office, I signed 3 documents. The first put the entire 41% into an irrevocable trust in my grandmother's name, with my lawyer and 2 independent trustees, and me as sole beneficiary, and no power for me to sell, gift, pledge, or dispose of the block for 10 years. The second was a standing instruction on how the block would vote against any transaction resulting in a change of control, any related party transaction with any entity connected to Taesung Capital, and any issue of new shares, permanently, not at my discretion, written in. The third was a letter to the board of Hanho Logistics and to Taesung Capital, copied to the company's auditors and to the Financial Supervisory Service, notifying them that the 41% block existed, that it had vested, that it would be voted as above, and this was the part my lawyer took out twice, and I put back in twice, that the beneficiary had no intention of seeking any board seat, executive position, or role of any kind in the company. "You're giving up control," she said. "I'm not taking control. It's not the same thing. They'll say you're a passive holder with a veto. That's exactly what I am. Look, I could have walked in there. I could have called an EGM in January, thrown my brothers off the board with the support of about 4 institutional holders who already hated them, and sat in Jung-Soo's chair by February. Everyone assumed I would. My lawyer had the notices drafted. But then I'd have owned Hanho Logistics. I'd have owned the lease, the Pyeongtaek facility, the debt, the 311 employees. And this is the actual reason, the small, ugly, true one. I'd have spent the rest of my life in a building in Songpa with my brother's name on it, being the youngest son, which is the only thing that has ever been done to me, and the only thing I have ever wanted out of. Grandmother wrote it down. I'm not giving you a company. You will find it dull. What Taesung Capital needed was 100% of the share register certified before the second tranche. They now had 59% and a permanent, unmovable, publicly documented 41 that would vote against them in every scenario until 2036. The letter went out at 1410. Taesung terminated the facility at 1635. Not deferred, terminated, with the first tranche recallable under the Material Adverse Change Clause. Chairman Park did it the same afternoon, which everybody in the industry read, correctly, as a man cutting off his own hand before it turned black. Hanho had spent the first tranche, 11 billion of it on land in Pyeongtaek, 22 on the lease buyout they'd already committed to. The rest on working capital, which is a polite way of saying it was gone. The banks called their facilities on the 27th. I found out about the receivership in January from a push notification, standing in a queue at a pharmacy. Teo came to the port on the 29th. He'd been drinking, not enormously, just enough to have stopped being frightened, and he stood at the gate in a suit that hadn't been pressed and said he wanted to talk in the canteen. And we talked in the canteen at 11 in the morning, next to a vending machine that was out of everything. He had a folder again. This one had his own name on it, from his own lawyer, a proper one, not the family firm, which meant he'd listened to me at least once in his life. I'm giving a statement, he said, about the account, about the flight, about the loan, all of it. Okay, it's going to be bad for him. Yes, he cried a bit then. He apologized for crying, and then he apologized for everything else in order. And it took 9 minutes, and it was thorough, and I believe every word of it was sincere. At the end, he said, "Is there any version where we're brothers again? Not now, in a few years. I'm not asking for now." And I gave him the only honest answer I had, which was, "I don't know, but I'm not going to say yes today to make this conversation end, because that's what I've done my whole life, and that's why you're all sitting here." He nodded. He took it better than I expected. He left half a coffee. He writes to me on the 1st of every month. I've never replied and I've never deleted one. Jung-soo came to the house on New Year's Eve. He'd found the address, which took him 9 days, and I later learned 400,000 won paid to somebody at a courier company. It was raining, because of course it was. He stood outside the gate at 9:30 at night in a coat that was still a good coat, with his hands out of his pockets so they could be seen, and he pressed the buzzer 11 times. Sari wanted to call the police. Yuna said nothing at all, which from her is a scream. I went down. I stood inside the gate. He stood outside it. Neither of us opened it, and that's how the whole conversation happened, through iron bars with rain coming off the top of them, which I did not plan, and which I have never stopped being grateful for. He did the speech. Some of it was good. He was better at this than Teo. He always has been better at everything, and he found things I hadn't expected him to find. He talked about our mother. He talked about the fact that he was 9 when I was born, and he was the one who fed me for a year because she was ill, which I hadn't known and which is probably true. He talked about the storage room and said he'd never once thought about it until this month, and that he'd thought about it every day for the last 3 weeks. Then he asked me to come to a meeting. That was the actual purpose. There was a hotel lobby and a restructuring, and a consortium in Busan who would put in enough to keep the operating company alive, and they needed the 41 to sign a standstill. And if I came on the 3rd of January and sat at a table with him and his wife and his father-in-law, we could all— "No," I said. "You haven't heard the— I'm not going to the meeting. Jeho, 300 people work there." 286, I said. "You laid off 25 on the 18th and it's in the filings." The rain came off the top bar of the gate and onto his shoulders. He hadn't got an umbrella. He'd worked out, correctly, that an umbrella would ruin it. 4 things, I said. "Then I'm going in. 1. I know you were 9, and I know you fed me, and I believe you. It doesn't buy this. 2. I'm not doing anything to you. The 41% votes the way it votes. It's in a trust I can't touch for 10 years. And I did that on purpose, on the 22nd, before I knew what would happen, so there's nobody to beg. That's the part you've never understood about me, and it's why you lost. I didn't take a weapon. I took away the thing you were going to use. 3. You put a loan in my name, not the flight, not the flat, not the account, the loan that took 4 minutes on somebody's phone and it would have followed me for 7 years. And you did it in case I came back and needed to be leverageable. And that is the one I'm never going to get past. 4. I stopped. I had a 4th. I'd had it for 11 days and it was the good one. The one about the funeral and the second row. And I stood there in the rain and found that I didn't want to give it to him because he'd have kept it and I'd rather he went home with 3. 4, I said. Get an umbrella. And I went in. He stayed at the gate for about 40 minutes. I know because Sari watched from the landing window the whole time with her arms crossed and gave me a running report I did not ask for. At some point, he sat down on the low wall opposite. At some point after that, he left. 2 days later, in the lift at Han Marine's head office, at 8:20, between the 3rd floor and the 11th, Sari kissed me. There was one other person in the lift, a man from finance called Bake, who has never once mentioned it to anybody and who now gets a bottle of something expensive from me every Lunar New Year. She did it without warning and without apology, and importantly, without looking up at the camera in the corner, which she absolutely knew was there, because she is the person who signed off the installation. That's the second one, she said as the doors opened. So you know I'm not pretending it was the boat. I stood in that lift while it went back down with me still in it, and then all the way back up. Yuna came into the reefer office at 11 with a folder and left it on the desk and said, without preamble, I saw the recording. I didn't say anything. I wasn't looking for it. Security flags any lift stop over 90 seconds and it comes to me. She put her hand on the folder and squared it with the edge of the desk. I'm not going to do anything about it. Not to her, not to you, and not the obvious thing. Yuna, the Wanhai schedule's in there for January. Berth 7's tight on the 11th. She was already at the door, and you'll tell me when you know. That was the deal. The trust started paying in March. 41% of a company in receivership is worth nothing on paper. But Hanho's operating arm was sold as a going concern to a mid-size group in Busan in February, and the shareholders' distribution after the secured creditors came out at a number I had to have explained to me twice. Not 11 billion. About a third of that. It's still more money than anybody in my family has ever had at one time. And it arrived in a trust account I couldn't touch without 3 signatures, which is exactly why I'd built it that way in December. I know myself, and I know that if it had come into a normal account on a Thursday, I'd have given it away by Sunday to whoever asked first. I did 4 things with it, and I told nobody about any of them, which is the part I'd defend least. I bought the Solyang building. SJ Asset Development had a care home with no residents, 60 days into a project with no purpose, in a district that had by then had 2 newspapers and a TV crew through it. My lawyer bought it through the trust in 11 days for 400 million more than they'd paid, and I've never once been sorry about the 400 million, because I'd have paid 2 billion, and they knew it and they didn't ask, which tells you something about how badly Taesung wanted the whole thing off their books before the audit season. I endowed it. Not 400 million a year for 10 years. 140 million a year, forever, off a capital block that can't be broken, which is less per year and much longer, and which was the argument I lost with Mrs. O, and then won with a calculator. I moved my father to a better facility in Bundang and put my name back on the visitor list, which I did not need money for, only a form in 11 weeks and 1 letter from a lawyer. And I paid Mr. Gu's daughter's tuition. That took me 4 months to find him for, and when I did, he told me to keep it. And I said it wasn't for him, and he said fine. And that was the entire conversation. Sari found out about Solyang from a local news site on a Tuesday. She came into the reefer office with her phone out and put it on the desk in front of me, screen up, and said absolutely nothing for about 8 seconds. You bought a building. The trust bought a building. You bought a building, and you did the whole thing through a lawyer in Mapo. And you were in this room every night that week eating my food and complaining about Berth 7. I wasn't complaining. Berth 7 is, do you understand? Sari said, that we would have driven you. That's it. That's the entire complaint. Not the money, not the secrecy. Either of us would have driven you to Namyangju 11 times and sat in a car park. And you don't let us, and you're not even doing it to be cruel, it just genuinely doesn't occur to you that anybody would want to. She took her phone back. Anyway, she said at the door. It's a good building, the lift's terrible. That night I got this secondhand, months later, and from Sari, so allow for it. The 2 of them sat at the kitchen table after I'd gone up. It had been about 6 months by then. Nothing had been decided. Nothing was going to be decided. That's the thing about the 2 of them that I understand now and did not understand at the time. They had a system in that house going back to their parents' funeral. And the system was that whoever felt it more got to act, and the other one held the dustpan. And I had walked into the middle of it and broken the only rule they had, which was that they had never once wanted the same thing. What Sari says happened is this. Yuna said, I can outlast you. Sari said, I know. Yuna said, that's not a threat. It's the only advantage I have, and I want you to know I'm aware of it. You'll do something. You'll kiss him in a lift. You'll drive to Bupyeong at midnight. You'll be that. And I'll be here in 5 years, in this kitchen, at 5 in the morning with a flask. And Sari said, then here's mine. I'm not going to stop, and I'm not going to be quiet about it. And if he chooses you, I'll move out of this house within a week. Because I'm not sitting at this table watching it, and I'd like you to know that in advance so you can factor it in. They agreed on 2 things. Neither of them would ever ask me to choose. And neither of them would ever, under any circumstance, make it a competition he could see. Because the one thing that would send that man back down the hill in a torn fleece is the day he works out that two people are in pain because of him. They shook on it, in a kitchen, at midnight, like a pair of freight brokers, and they both, separately, kept it, for a very long time. A year and a bit later. This is where everything is. Terminal 4 kept the 4 berths in the northern basin. The concession went to committee in June, and Yuna's 200-page file went in against a bid backed by a bank that had, by then, spent 8 months explaining a care home purchase to a financial supervisory panel. She won it by a margin nobody has ever published. She has not mentioned it once. There is a copy of the award letter in a drawer in the tower under a box of pencils, and I know that because I've looked. Hanwha Logistics doesn't exist. The name went with the operating company to the Busan Group, and they retired it in the rebrand. Which means that for about 400 million, somebody erased my family from a business it had been in for 51 years. On a Tuesday, in a press release. Jung-soo is a subcontract coordinator for a haulage broker in Ansan. I know this because I saw him in June at the freight exchange in Songdo, standing at the back of a bidding hall with a lanyard on, and he did not look up for the entire 40 minutes I was in the room. He's not ruined the way people mean it. He's employed, he's married, he lives in an apartment in his wife's name. He just has to stand in rooms now where nobody knows who his family was and be assessed on that morning's work. Which is what I did for 5 years, and I'd be lying if I said that thought does nothing for me. Teo gave his statement. It cost him 9 months and his license to act as a company director. He writes on the 1st of every month. I still haven't replied. Mr. Gu got a place in Guri through a housing lottery and sends me a photograph of a different part of his kitchen roughly every 6 weeks, with no message attached. Chairman Park Dong-hoon is still Chairman Park Dong-hoon. That's the honest ending on him. He gave up about 11 billion won and 1 afternoon of his life. And he took a panel hearing over the care home purchase where his lawyers used the words administrative oversight 9 times. And then he went to Singapore in April to open something. There was no scene. Nobody knelt. I saw a photograph of him in a business magazine in a dentist's waiting room in Bundang, and I looked at it for a while and then I read about golf instead. Men like that don't fall. They just occasionally have to move something off a desk. I work nights. That's the part everybody finds annoying. I could do anything. I sit on the reefer desk at Terminal 4 from 9 at night till 6 in the morning, 4 days a week. And on the other 3, I run the trust, which is a laptop and a folder and 11 phone calls a month. Yuna offered me operations director in writing, twice. I turned it down twice, and the second time she said, "Good, the board would have been unbearable," and went back to her screen, and I saw her mouth do something on the way out. Malsoon died in August, in her sleep, in room 4 of a building she had personally forced 2 billionaires and a chairman to fight over. She was 83. She had complained about the lift on the Thursday. At the funeral, I stood in the first row. Not because anyone told me to. Sari put me there physically, with a hand between my shoulder blades in front of about 60 people, including her own relatives. Then she stood on one side of me, and Yuna stood on the other, and neither of them moved for 2 hours. And at the end, an old man I didn't know asked me if I was the grandson. I said yes. I've thought about that answer a lot. Here's the last thing. Yesterday, I came off shift at 6 in the morning and drove back up the hill with the sun coming up over the pine. And I let myself in through the side door. There was a flask on the hall table. Cap loosened. Under it, she has done this every day for a year and a half, and neither of us has ever mentioned it. And if I ever say a word about it out loud, she'll stop, so I won't. Was a sticky note in handwriting like an architect's, with one line on it about birth 11, which was not a question that needed answering at 6 in the morning, and which she knows I will answer anyway. On the second floor, Yuna's study light was on. It's on most nights. She works till 2 and gets up at 5, and she is going to run that terminal until she's 90, and I have never once seen her sit down in a room without a document in it. Above that, on the 3rd floor, my own landing. And on the way up, on the step where the wood creaks, Sari was sitting. In pajamas with a coat over them, with her car keys in one hand for no reason at all, except that she'd fallen asleep holding them, waiting on a staircase for a man who finishes at 6. She heard the creak and opened her eyes. "There's soup," she said. "It's 6 in the morning." "There's soup at 6 in the morning. It's not for you specifically." "Okay. It's soup, Jeho." She stood up. She was on the step above me, which put us at the same height, which she has never once let go to waste. Behind her, at the top of the stairs, was my door. Below and behind me, on the 2nd floor landing, a light was on under another one, and the woman in that room had heard the creak too, because that woman hears everything in this house and had not come out because she never does, and because she promised her sister she wouldn't. 2 doors, 1 flask on the hall table, One person on the stairs awake since 4. I know exactly what everyone wants me to tell you here. I'm not going to. I put my hand on the rail. Sari didn't move out of the way, and I didn't ask her to. And the light was coming up gray through the window on the landing. And somewhere down the hill, the 610 bus went past on the main road, the way it does every single morning, whether anyone on it is going anywhere or not.